Hey guys, and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk to you about the most badass elementalist build you have ever seen in your entire life, the Glyphomancer. Okay. Alright, maybe not. Maybe Glyphomancer isn't a particularly good build. Actually, today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about Runes of the Druid, about ArenaNet's idea for creating new rune sets and skill types on the new elite specializations that would kind of cross over multiple classes so that they could make rune sets that impacted multiple classes at once, and sort of a little bit of how they failed to hit the mark in a huge way. Now, some of these runes that they've added for some new classes actually have incredible synergy and use on multiple classes. Specifically, like Runes of the Berserker are kind of good on pretty much any Condi spec you're looking at for, like, the raid perspective at least. But today, I really want to check out some of these badass new runes that the Druid got, which affect glyphs. So this was ArenaNet's idea. Let's give Druid glyphs and then create a rune set which impacts glyphs. And then we've created a rune set that not only Druids are interested in, but the Elementalists are too. Similar with Chronomancers getting wells so that their runes can affect wells, and then even Necromancers can maybe get some use out of it. And it means that in the future, as they continue to spread, say, glyphs or wells or whatever out across multiple classes, we suddenly see lots more viable and interesting runes. Actually, to me, one of the most fun parts of making builds is where you find an awesome synergy between your runes, your skills, and your traits all together, and it all gels into hopefully something awesome. But there's a problem with Guild Wars 2. It's always like the unintuitive option that ends up being the smarter thing. A great thing that highlights this to me, on Elementalist specifically, is if you want to play a condition damage Elementalist, the intuitive thing to go for might be, oh, hey, take Cleansing Fire, this interacts with Condis, it puts out 3 burn. Let's take Power Overwhelming, because this interacts with Condis, that we get condition damage based on our power. And hey, let's take Blinding Ashes, blinding foes that we burn. This is pretty cool. Or, you know, maybe Pyromancer's Puissance, right? And yet the build actually, for the best Condi damage, is exactly the same as if you were saying running Glass Staff. This stuff always frustrates me. And today I want to look at the way Heart of Thorns dealt with the Druid runes. So here's the idea. Druid runes give you this. Healing power. Great. Elementalists are sort of okay in that realm. Gives you vitality. Alright, that's decent enough. Elementalists have low vitality, so a bit of vitality on there gives you a bit of health. Sure, we're looking okay. But then the really exciting one, Tier 6, gain plus 500 healing power for 3 seconds after casting a glyph. Oh, mama! Doesn't this look good? We can bump our healing power, therefore, up. If we ran a healing set like I've done here, we're in Cleric's gear. We've got a nice Ascended Magi's weapon here with a Sigil of Benevolence and Renewal. We've got pure Cleric's trinkets over here. We're already up to 1,700 healing power. And if I just pop one of my glyphs, we got up to 2,237. Actually, there's some food from Verdant Brink. Don't have it on me at the moment, but there's some food from Verdant Brink, which means you gain plus 200 healing power when you use a heal skill. That's chocolate tapioca pudding. My god, and look, we get a heal glyph. So by just popping this, we can trigger our food and our runes together for plus 700 healing power. Just from that alone. How exciting is that? So the idea is we drop this, and then we'd maybe drop a couple of heals here, and all of a sudden our staff heals and our overloads and stuff are more potent than you've ever seen before. Well, not quite. So today I want to talk to you guys about why this build is just pretty much terrible, and why I believe by design Druid runes are pretty awful, and ArenaNet completely missed the mark, their idea here, with implementing runes that go and offer some incentive across multiple professions. The only professions in the entire game that have access to glyphs right now are Druid and Ellie. The fact that the Druid scaling is still such that you can heal comfortably and support comfortably in basically pure Zerker when it comes down to it, kind of makes Druid runes look a bit rubbish on Druid as it is. But what about the Ellie Druid crossover? Is this at all viable? The answer is no. I want to talk to you guys about why this is such a problem. And also, at the end of the video, maybe put forward some suggestions as to how it could be fixed, but maybe then demonstrate to you guys how deep this problem truly runs. Alright, so first of all, I would say there are 2 different branches of the issue here. Number 1 is the glyph skills themselves. While Druid kind of has healing synergy on their glyphs, Elementalist glyphs basically don't offer very much in that regard at all. Now, to the untrained eye, it might look like glyphs actually offer a lot for a heal character. The idea of a glyph, if you guys are totally unfamiliar with both of these classes, is their effect changes based on your form or attunement. So if I cast a glyph in fire attunement, they're supposed to have more offensive effects, while if I cast a glyph in water attunement, they have more defensive and healy effects. So surely if we cast a lot of glyphs in water attunement, there will be synergy then with, you know, all this healing power we're getting, especially from that tier 6. But to actually look at the skills, it just doesn't work that way. Number one, of course, there's a bit of a false dichotomy I'm throwing you here. The idea that we have to run all glyphs or no glyphs. We could go some kind of middle ground, but just to demonstrate all of them here, if we're running a Healy Ellie, okay, we're trying to support other people as well as ourselves. And in this case, do we really want to run Glyph of Elemental Harmony, which is a self-heal with a good coefficient on it? And the one benefit of casting it in water attunement is that it gives us regeneration on ourselves. As you guys should be familiar, regeneration is basically the worst boon out there. It's the most boring boon. It has the least impact on gameplay. Mathematically, you can look at how healing power scales with regeneration and say, oh, it's really effective. But because it's such a minute amount over such a long period of time, regeneration really doesn't count for very much at all in the game at the moment. This is why so many people have been calling for it to be changed to perhaps stack intensity. Maybe when we live in that world, the glyphs will be a little bit different, but we certainly don't right now. And what this basically means is we just don't want Glyph of Elemental Harmony. Even when traded, the cooldown's not too great. If we want to support other people, there are only two skills we really want to run. We want to run Wash Away the Pain, ideally. This is a huge heal that will heal everyone else around us in the exact same amount as it will heal for us, or near about. Because of like benevolence and things changing the formulas. Or we want to run Arcane Brilliance here. Arcane Brilliance, you'll notice, there's a really crappy coefficient on it. It isn't even that good. If we hit a lot of targets, it can be quite good. But at least it's a blast. And by being a blast, what it means is we can drop, you know, say a water field and use Arcane Brilliance in it and actually splash a heal out to our allies, which again, the whole benevolence thing would then actually make it a little bit more comparable to something, right? Both of these skills are far better than the glyph. So already the heal skill, we don't really want to run. But what about some of the other glyphs? Some of the other glyphs can be quite good. Now, you might already know that Glyph of Elementals, okay, our elite, is actually really good for support when you use it in water attunement. And that's because when you summon this guy, and summoning him would give us our extra healing power. He actually has this flip over skill here, which the tooltip doesn't read properly. But what this does is when you activate it in combat, after a long delay, the elemental will eventually go into a big animation where he basically splashes down a dagger offhand 5, okay? A cleansing wave. He basically uses this. Except his cleansing wave is really powerful. It's basically enough to put you from almost no health to 100% health when you're on a Zerk Ellie in, say, dungeons. And this is really useful. This is pretty cool. But there is no synergy here with our Druid runes. First of all, even though the heal is very high, it's very point-blank AoE. It only really works in very static environments where lots of people are stacked together, something the game is moving away from, especially when you look at the raiding perspective. But further, it's slow. It takes a long time to activate. Even though you see a 14-second cooldown on this flip over skill here, he's probably only going to activate it around now, after when it's 9 seconds left on the clock, and he's easily interrupted, and he doesn't last that long. After he's dead, you have a huge cooldown to contend with. This huge cooldown is all time that you're not going to be so easily proccing your tier 6. And that's another big universal problem for all of these glyphs. This isn't the only other huge cooldown. The other summon we get, which is pretty much useless, okay, especially in water attunement, if we're going for this heal synergy idea, is Glyph of Lesser Elementals. Glyph of Lesser Elementals may say it has a 40-second cooldown on it, but when it swaps this flip over skill, you actually have to wait 60 seconds for this guy to die, unless he dies prematurely. Much less likely to happen since the changes to Heart of Thorns where AI doesn't get focused, I'll give you that. But we're going to have to wait like 60 seconds. That's not actually a good thing, because we have to wait 60 seconds, then the 40-second cooldown begins. So that's a minute cooldown right there. This one here is 150 seconds for a cooldown before we can proc our rune again. That's 2 of our glyphs straight away. So what if we opt not to use those at all? We try not to use any of our summons. Well, our summons are our only choice for the elite. Let's look at the other ones. Glyph of Storms I'll get to in a second. Next one that looks incredibly supportive is renewal, the Glyph of renewal, sorry. Glyph of renewal is a pretty cool skill. It's actually one of the most flavorful skills, in my opinion, that Elementalist has, but this has never been worth using. So this revives someone, okay? This revives an ally, and it has a different effect based on your attunement. Now, regardless of the attunement you're in on this one, it's supportive. Does that mean we get heal synergy out of it? Of course it doesn't, because this is playing with a down state, and down state has nothing to do with healing power whatsoever. So check it out. We've got renewal of fire. This will res someone on a long cast time. I won't finish the cast. This is the cast time you've got to contend with. Much worse than more favorable things like war banner, okay? But you've got this long cast time to deal with. The bonus effect in fire is that as you put a little buff on you, which means next time you go down, you instantly res. And this is basically the only place that this skill has ever really seen use, in my opinion, since launch. We used to see people in PvP, when underwater combat existed in PvP, people would go underwater and it would flip their skills, and if they felt like they were going to die, say on Temple of the Silent Storm, they're trying to peel away, right, because they've been pressured away from the top middle buff, they would activate this underwater without rezzing someone, and what this would do is put the buff on them, and then they could run around, go to middle something, die, play recklessly, and then instantly res themselves. It was a cheesy, stupid little thing you could do. That was basically the only place you ever really saw this be used. Earth, if anything, is the best, because this actually revives 3 targets instead of just 1. Air teleports a body to you. This actually, in my opinion, is a bit of a remnant of Guild Wars 1 design. In Guild Wars 1, one of the most popular res abilities you could use was Rebirth for monks, and Rebirth was a really long cast time, really high energy cost, incredibly restrictive skill, but the benefit to it was when you summoned a body, it would blink it to your location, and this was incredibly useful in Guild Wars 1, where there was actual risk in PvE encounters, and you could cause a giant wipe trying to run into res someone who, as soon as they stood up, would aggro an entire room of mobs. That design just doesn't exist in Guild Wars 2's PvE. It's non-existent. And then finally, you've got water. And so water revives someone with 100% health. And we'll ignore the fact that stuff like Runes of Mercy can get you 80% of the way there anyway. And once again, this is just like a flat heal thing. This has nothing to do... We could be on a Berserker or an Assassin's character. And again, it doesn't matter whether we... You know, the fact that this is a Glyph that then gives us a ton of healing power... And then, you know, it could give him, 150% health when he revives. That is not a thing. With this renewal, Glyph needs a complete redesign, in my opinion. Perhaps one of the achievements should, like, the air one should pick people up from defeated or something, or with a much longer cast time, much more like the old Rebirth days. I have no idea, but this thing is basically broken in design in so many ways. And again, has negative synergy with the idea of our runes. Let's keep running, though. The last Glyph to talk about before Glyph of Storms is a Glyph of Elemental Power. This is actually one of the most functional glyphs we have, second only to Glyph of Storms. But again, it has no synergy. This is actually a great glyph to use on Condi builds, because when they changed Condi, they did actually look at this and they gave it 2 stacks of burn, which are very short duration, but they're okay. And actually playing incredibly glassy builds as well, it's pretty amazing in air attunement, because that heavy weakness uptime, basically perma weakness on people that you're hitting, can really enable you to win a lot of close matchups. The other 2 attunements are kind of lackluster. The fact it's a break stun doesn't quite work with its effect of a long rolling buff that's going to be on you, is kind of meh, right? And again, definitely has no synergy with our runes. And then the same story for Glyph of Storms. While it's a great, powerful skill that we see people use in air attunement very frequently for high stacks of Vuln in like 5-man groups, or fire attunement, which just as extra damage while you're rolling, say, on your glass staff in, for example, a raid. While it's a good skill, in water attunement, it still doesn't have anything to do with healing or anything that Druid runes offer. It just puts chill out on foes. And chill is marginally useful. Maybe in PvP, where it's reducing skill cooldowns, but you're never going to see someone take such a skill as this simply to chill people on a node, all right? They will be using it in air. So, as you can see, immediately, ArenaNet have made a big mistake. What they've done is they've come up with a cool idea. Let's put glyphs on Druid, create a rune set that affects more than one class, but this really only has relevance at all for Druid, because not a single glyph actually affects healing power whatsoever. Not to mention, they have high cooldowns that mean you barely ever get the access to the tier 6. There is always something better to run. Running just simply on a pure Zerk build without Druid runes, a bunch of Tempest shouts, okay, and then taking the Tempest with Rebound, for example, which actually has some support there, which scales off of healing power, the amount that it will heal people, and then simply taking Elemental Bastion so that your auras heal, right, without even being water attunement. You're actually getting more support out than you were running like pure clerics but with glyphs, okay? It's a pretty dire situation. The final nail in the coffin too is the trait for the glyphs. Now you'll notice not only are the glyphs pretty crappy at supporting, but other than running a single Glyph of Storms, the idea of playing like a Glyphomancer is sort of laughable. What does a build like this do? Really very, very little. Let's have a look at the trait. Now, the trait exists in Air Attunement, which is an offensive line, which is definitely something I have to talk about in a second. But it exists here in the middle, Inscription. And Inscription just does more of the same that we already saw on our heal skill. The only unique thing about the heal skill is it gives you a boon based on the attunement you are in. So, like, it's best to cast it in Earth, for example, because you get a little bit of protection there. Well, Inscription just, like, doubles up on that for you. So, grants a boon associated with your current attunement when you cast a glyph, reduces glyph recharge. The recharge reduction is nice, but doesn't affect the duration of your elementals, so really doesn't mean anything there. When you look at Glyph of Renewal, and the ridiculous cooldown you have to deal with anyway, even traded this is at 130-second cooldown, okay? Comparable to, say, your Elite. And just look at what it gives us. These are the boons. A single stack of Might. A single stack of regeneration that only lasts 10 seconds. A single stack of swiftness, which if you're in a raid scenario or a dungeon scenario or hell, if you're just an elementalist that has access to overloads with a little bit of swiftness, or, you know, a staff that can push out a bit of swiftness, or a dagger offhand that can push out 10 swiftness, the swiftness is further useless. And then finally, an actual decent boon, protection, but oh, guess what? It only lasts for 3 seconds. The same amount as you could get from popping an aura, which, guess what, can be AoE and buffed up. So now, hopefully, you guys have seen a little bit more of the problems that exist here. Ignore Druid runes just for a second. For 1 second, let's push them away and look at Elementalist on its own, look at Inscription, and see what we could do to improve this. Well, there's a lot of theoretical improvements and buffs you could give to Inscription. It's very easy to come up with them. For example, this single stack of Might isn't even like AoE or anything. It doesn't even share it out. So if we want to run with the ball here of the idea of this being somewhat supportive, why don't we make these boons AoE? Even AoE, this is nothing of a buff, and people won't be using it for some kind of, like, you know, AoE support here. But if it was, say, 3 stacks of Might in Fire Attunement, we could load up on Glyphs, put out about 15 Might for people using all of our cooldowns for 20 seconds. It's still not great, but it's at least something, and it pushes it out to our allies. Again, for a long time now, I felt ArenaNet could play with the target cap. You know, if this was on 10 targets... that would be actually pretty interesting. It would push it into a bit of a niche, and that could be somewhat interesting. Regeneration is basically useless. Swiftness is basically useless. Even Might, we're generally, through a lot of comps at the moment, easily capped out at 25 all the time. So what do? Protection is nice, but far too short duration. If we assume that these are AoE, maybe you could just change some of the boons up. Actually, you'll notice in the Arcane line, ArenaNet already did something fairly interesting. They did a similar idea with Elemental Contingency. As you're being hit, you gain a boon depending on your attunement. And you'll see that they've got, like, Retaliation on there. They've got Fury on there. They've got Vigor on there. You could mix some of these into this trait. If it was pushing out AoE retail, that would definitely push it into a different place that the Elementalist hasn't been known for before. At the moment, the only way Ellies can get retail is through this kind of very obscure place. And so then you have ideas of giving it boons that the class doesn't already have access to. So what about, like, resistance? That would be strong, right? An AoE way of putting out resistance? But you get into problems now. This solution has the serious problem that it dilutes the purity of that class's purpose. Maybe Elementalist isn't supposed to be a class that pushes out AoE resistance. But if we're just talking about giving it, like, Vigor, Fury, Might AoE, well, that's doing the exact same thing that we already see, like, aura sharing support does, except worse, like, much worse. Think about it. You have to camp in a specific attunement to get that effect, and then you can't even push out the other boons. You can only pick one of those boons while, you know, just spamming auras and shouts pushes a billion of them out anyway, you know, with a perma-prot on top. And none of this still gets around the fact that even a trait such as that, which would have more of a place, still has nothing to do with healing power. If we lived in the world where, as people were proposing, where instead of adding concentration and boon duration with Heart of Thorns, ArenaNet had simply rolled boon duration into healing power and given it a new name. If we lived in that world, we would see some synergy here, because you would build that stat for some heal, but it would also give you these longer boon durations, but they just didn't do that. And so you see the mess that we're in. This is never... not based on the way that the glyphs work, not based on the way that the trait works, not based on the way that the rune works, going to gel together, all right? And so did ArenaNet really hit their design there? you know, in a lot of ways, this seems like it's not even in the right trait line. This should be an arcane thing, right? Because it is dependent on your attunement, which is what arcane's all about. Why do we have glyphs in air and arcane skills, which are skills that always crit, okay? Air, critting, jumbled up like this. In general, I think Elemental is quite well designed and there's decent purity in the specialization lines, but this is just a garbled mess. And what it's meant is, you know, when they added the Druid and they thought, oh, let's just slap a bunch of healing power on, they've completely missed the mark. I'd love to hear what some of your suggestions would be to improve this, guys. Let me know if you like the video. It's just a bit of a critique at one element, one potential build that I wanted to do for Elemental. So I just wanted to show you guys how deeply seated some of these issues are. And I don't know, if you guys like this, maybe we can have a look at some other rune sets, some sigils, some other like really broken things or interesting designs and just how they end up falling short of the mark. Well, in any case, hope you enjoyed a little something. Thanks very much for watching the video, guys. And I'll see you tomorrow. Rest in peace, the Druid Tempest Hybrid Dream. See you tomorrow, guys.